Good morning, councillors, and welcome to the COVID-19 Response Committee meeting on April the 30th, being a Thursday, 2020. And welcome to the meeting, and also the members of public who are watching from home. It's good to have you on board as well. So I'd like to call for apologies, and I do know I have one from Councillor Cameron and Councillor Brahm, and haven't heard from Councillor Falloon yet. He just may have issues connecting. So give someone move that we accept those apologies, and apologies for lateness. Stuart and Angus, all in favour, raise your hand. Carried. Extraordinary business, and there's just one item there which we just want to discuss in public excluded district tourism, with discussion there in committee. Declarations of interest. Any matter on today's agenda you need to declare? No. And we'll have the COVID-19 Response Committee minutes from the last meeting, which is on page 3. Any alterations or additions? Page 4, and it goes 4, 5 and 6. Depends which actually it is. Page 5 and page 6. Give a mover that we true and accurate record of that meeting. Liz and Roger seconded. All in favour, raise your hand. Carried. And we're going to have ECAN Chief Executive Bill Bayfield, who's retiring from his position as Chief Executive of ECAN. He hasn't come on board just yet, so we're just waiting for him. While we're doing that, Hamish, do you think we should do some other business, or just perhaps wait?
It's the next report is reasonably, in fact, the next few are, will require some consideration and discussion. So there is a risk that we'll just get started and Bill will join in. So
he was due at 9:10, I think, and it's 9:10 now. So perhaps we just adjourn the meeting for a few minutes until Bill comes in. He shouldn't be too far away, and we can resume as soon as he comes in. So we'll adjourn the meeting, and Ruben, you'll do appropriately. Let us know when you have.
That's him now.
No.
Welcome, Bill.
Yeah, welcome, Bill, and welcome to our COVID-19 meeting. And glad you could join us today. It's one of your last meetings, I think. We're glad you could join Ashburton Council for what you've done for the district in the last 10 years. But I'll just hand over to Hamish to just introduce you, and then the floor will be yours to talk to us.
Thanks, Mr. Beer. It's my pleasure, councillors, to welcome Bill to this meeting. Bill is a vastly experienced executive, vastly experienced in the regional council world. I know prior to coming to Canterbury Regional Council around about 2010, around about the time of the earthquakes, might have been 2011, he had previously been the CEO of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. And prior to that, had worked for the Ministry for the Environment and the Taranaki Regional Council. So he clearly knows the environment. He knows regulation and policy around the environment. My lasting impressions, though, well, not lasting, because we're still going to be involved with Bill, aren't we? But my impressions of Bill have got nothing to do with his capability and experience. They're really to do with the support, the friendship, the wisdom that Bill shows all councils, all territorial authorities in the Canterbury region. A bit of a father figure in terms of a wise head for our region, and he will be sorely missed from our group. Of course, we know he is going to the new water regulator, and he will be a part of our world, obviously, in that role in Wellington. And one thing we know, we won't be getting any favours from Bill. But we know that Bill will be considered and evidence-based and Bill, I've always appreciated you've returned every single call or text or email I've ever sent you, so we know we'll get an answer whether we like it or not. So with those brief few words, I read something the other day, Bill, that your time in Canterbury is being bookended by natural disaster. Of course, you started in the earthquakes and you're leaving in COVID-19. So it's certainly a tumultuous decade, I guess, while you've been there with the issues around democracy and commissioners and turning to elected members. So it's been quite a time you've had there, and you've done extremely well and always been a friend to us. So with those few words of introduction, Bill, you're welcome to reflect on your time for the next few moments and about your relationship down here in Ashburton in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamish and Neil. Pleasure to chat to you this morning. I'd like to congratulate, first of all, the women of your council, because quite clearly they have by far the best taste in backgrounds. Liz, Diane, Lynette, Caroline, you're not quite up there, but the other three are absolutely superb, and sitting from here, it looks great. Diane, you definitely look as if you're entirely in charge of the foothills and Alps of the Ashburton district. So,
one of my favourite places up in our back country.
Yep. And it's funny because one of my favourite places is kind of anything when I could get to head up into the Hakateria and up to Mount Sunday. And one of my fondest memories of Canterbury is actually an opportunity to take my mother on an Erawan big horse. Fantastic. Yeah, what a tumultuous start. If I go back to that, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the YouTube of my welcoming at Warehua Marae when a 5.9 and then a 6.1 hit an hour later. And the rafters on the Marae main building went in and out of their sockets. And I was incredibly impressed with the fortitude or stupidity. I've talked about this often with Tiffany O'Regan, of the Ngaitahu front bench, who did not move a muscle when all of that was going down. And one of my handover team from the Bay of Plenty actually broke ranks and rang for the door, which I actually thought was entirely sensible, but I knew that my job was to sit and deal with it come what may. But he's never been forgiven, either in the Bay of Plenty or in Canterbury by Ngaitahu. He's definitely been ranked. But that was the only function that they could welcome me with, and it got hit by 2 earthquakes. And now I'm leaving in a pandemic, and they can't do any functions either. So this is the best we get. But thank you very much. We've talked before when you came up as councillors, so I won't leave this very long. But I'll just simply say that I'm very, very pleased to be handing over to an acting CE from within my own very experienced team, which is Stephanie Ricksecker. Our Director of Science will now be stepping up to take my place as acting CE from Monday. And it will be very much business as usual. And so, to my mind, that's really important, that when I walk out, despite all the nice words you say about me, Hamish, there should be barely a ripple, and we all have to carry on. I guess right now it's hard to judge all of the things we've been working on with this government, all the things we've been trying to interpret what they're doing, and they've been doing an awful lot. Now we've got to think about how fast any of them will actually come to fruition, how fast any of them will actually be implemented. I think the focus for the next year, and I'd like to say that positively, the next year will be very much on recovery from a recession post-COVID. And I think that all of us have to, and we are certainly, have to look at our programs and our plans for the future and rethink how we might be implementing some of those. The job I go to in Wellington as the water regulator, CEO, is very much different already in description from that which I was tapped on the shoulder and asked to take in January. And so it's going to be interesting for me to get up there as soon as I can to find out what they've done to my budget and to find out what their instructions and requests are of me. But it's also interesting for me to note that the public health division that used to do water testing and water checking have basically been 110% involved in COVID. And so there is a real question now, if that team comes over to the water regulator, what status is our public health divisions in? And should they in the long term belong with the DHBs, or should there be a separate public health division as there is in many other OECD nations around the world? So I'm going up to some interesting policy debates and interesting policy decisions. And I will, as Hamish has said, be suitably blunt and honest. I'm getting too old to do anything else. But just to be forthright, I guess, in terms of when change is needed or when change is warranted, and prepared to debate if you feel or others feel that the change that we're proposing is not warranted. It's interesting that COVID was a pandemic that was a flu, but the next one could just as easily be waterborne, and that's important to remember. I really enjoyed working with you, Neil, Stuart, all of you, Angus in particular, Hamish, and all of you. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for looking after a special part. And I guess for me is, if I think about it, and I might be wrong, Angus, but the Rakaia and the Ashburton, until recently, and the Rangitata, were three rivers that hadn't really flooded on me, because people have been totting up here that I've apparently been responsible for earthquakes, pandemics, fires, and second earthquakes and flood events. And the sooner I go, the better.
Thanks for that summation, Bill. Councillors, we can, if you want to, you can chat to Bill. Angus, I think I can see your lips moving, but we can't hear you. If you unmute, your floor is yours. Let me try.
Yeah, Bill, that's easy. That's Environment Canterbury's historic river control works that have been put in place by good engineers who know the local terrain.
Thanks, Angus. Any other councillors wish to say anything? Bill? Not seeing anything there. Stuart.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yep. Welcome and goodbye, Bill. It's good that somebody from your background is going into that position. Hopefully you understand where local government comes from. If we had somebody from outside the public service that's had no experience with local government, it could rebound on us. So hopefully you'll use your background in local government to influence the legislation or whatever what actually comes, that it's not impossible for us to implement. Or
Stuart, thanks for that. I think that's why they've chosen me. Probably also think that they've accepted a degree of risk in hiring me that I am going to bring that view, which is that to my mind, I want to make real progress in both water supply and waste disposal through what I would call co-design of the systems. And it's interesting that for me, in the analysis I've done before I go to take up the job, I'm probably more interested in the electricity system in New Zealand as a regulated system and a performing system than I am in the current public health water system. And it's funny because David Cagle told me that about a month and a half after I got the job. He said, the model you'll be looking at, and he's right. I hope that as a regulator, it's not a regulator that's a demanding regulator, but a regulator that's looking to lift the whole system of New Zealand drinking water safety and wastewater disposal. And that means you've got to be in the trenches as well, recognising the problems with those that treat wastewater and those that treat and supply drinking water. It's not easy tasks, but I look back to the event that caused the water regulator to be formed, Havelock North, and poisoned 5,000 people, left 15 with permanent disabilities and killed 5. It was no small event, and you don't have an event like that in New Zealand systems without, in my view, generally making a change. And indeed, the independent review, found there were faults, and so now we go to work. One thing I would add is that, I reckon an awful lot of work's been going on in drinking water in particular over the last 2 years, as local government has realised that expectations are about to change, the regime's about to change. There's been an awful lot of lifting of performance, and we've seen that in Canterbury. And so I take that with me, that it's not a big stick. This one is a growing the capability right across New Zealand.
Yeah. Good. Thanks for all those words there, Bill. And in Ashburton, we've had plan changes. I think 1 to 7 that I'm aware of. There's probably more there, but I think 2, 5, and 7 have affected us. We've got an Ashburton River plan. There's a fresh water plan out there as well from central government, and we know your views on that, and hopefully they will show through in the final delivery of that. But you're moving to the drinking water space, and that is great. So we still will have involvement with you. And Hamish said that we wouldn't expect any favours, but I want one favour from you when you're in that role. And that favour is let common sense prevail. That's the only favour we ask of you. And if that prevails, all will be good, I think. So, and I don't think that will be hard for you to give us that favour either, knowing your approach. So thanks very much for the 10 years you've done for Canterbury and especially Ashburton. And we'll look forward to seeing you in your new role in the very near future. Thanks very much, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you all. See you again soon.
Okay, councillors, we'll move on to item number 5 and level 4 lockdown financial implications. And welcome, Carolyn and John. You've come on, and we still haven't got Lane yet, I don't think. But no, that's Paul that come on. Yeah. So, Paul, here's your report, level 4 breakdown, financial implications, and it's for the 1 month of April. It's April, I think, isn't it? Yeah. Paul, anything further to add to your report, or do you want to ask questions?
I'll take it as read, other than just to explain, it's only a 4-week period. So any further restrictions after that 4-week period won't be included, and timing differences has generally been ignored. So I've only looked really at actual losses of revenue rather than delays in them in receiving it. So for example, the NZTA subsidy, we're likely to get that full amount, but we won't get it in the time period that we originally budgeted for. It may slip over into some of it into the new year. And to get a full effect of what's happening in the whole year, you'd need to read this report together with the latest financial variance report. I'm happy to answer any questions on it.
Okay, and what you are signalling to us is that at the end of year, we will not have a balanced budget. That's probably the main signal. And here's 1 month of perceived activity or lack of for that 1 month. And it's around about 430,000 for that month, I think our income is going to be, or the net effect is going to be down, if I've read that report right.
That's correct.
With another, that was April, so we've got May and June to go. So the sooner we get back to business as usual, the sooner we can stem the losses. And we're just thinking we're also a reasonably big part of the economy in Mid Canterbury. And if that was our monthly loss, there's other businesses out there who will have had more than that. So we're part of the picture, but there's others who've taken a bigger hit than what we're taking. So be mindful of them out there. And the only way we can help them is to use their services when they're back online. Same as the council services. Use them again when they come back online to stem the losses. Councillors, any questions of Paul? I'm not seeing any there. So there's a recommendation there that the committee receives the report. Could I move in a seconder for that? John and Lynette. Any further debate, discussion? I'll put the motion. I'm in favour. All those in favour, raise your right hand. And how do I know it's your right hand? I don't. Stuart covered all bases. Passed. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Next item of business is item number 6, buying local procurement process. And I'll just get to that. Item on this screen. And Tony, we have Tony here. Any questions for Tony? Or do you want to add anything further to your report, Tony? It is well written. It's all there. But if there's any questions of councillors, please ask. Doesn't appear to be any. I'm just.
My hand up.
Oh, Carolyn. Sorry, Carolyn, the floor is yours.
Tony, thank you for the report. I don't have any questions on the report, but I do have a point to make, and the recommendation.
Carolyn, you just got muted. Could you just unmute? You've just missed half of what you said.
Sorry, I'll start again. Thanks.
Start again.
Thank you for the report, Tony, and I agree with the report, and I have no questions on the report, but I recommend of the options of do some, I would recommend we do the most. I think, speaking to the policy, I think in the time of economic uncertainty and a likely increase in unemployment, we need a policy that supports a local industry and growth. And also I think we need to remember that significant funding comes into the council from the local industry and business. So this policy really needs to focus on procurement as a source of good, which I think it would be, and to improve our economic, environmental and social aspects. Of course, the policy has to have the usual things, because I can hear people say, well, we want value and quality, and if we do local, how can we guarantee the quality? And I think that needs to be part of it. But we need to seek the best value for our town, and we want our procurement to contribute to our local economy. And our social campaign, buy local and we're open for business, we need to also not only talk the talk, but we need to walk the walk. And we need to, the Ashburton Council, the Ashburton District Council needs to support the local business. And I think the do most is the best option.
Thanks for that. Diane, you did have your hand up. It's disappeared.
I was just going to thank Tony because I thought the report was very clear and very well written. Just want to say well done.
Okay, Lynette.
I was just going to say thank you to Tony for that report too, and I do not agree with doing most. I think the ratepayers in this district wouldn't thank us for having their rates put up because we're going to buy locally, and it could be far more expensive for us to buy locally, I think, and who is local and who isn't. A lot of these big shops aren't local. It goes out of the district, out of the country. So I think we stick and do with number 2 and do some. I think that's the most beneficial for us.
And that is the preferred option there, which we'll move to it shortly.
Yes, I think so.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think the report put together by Rachel and Tony is excellent. Unfortunately, they didn't have the time to do how much local buying we're actually doing. But when you stand back and look at it from a pragmatic point of view, by buying local, how much difference is it going to make? Most of our expenditure is probably taken up in wages, and most of those people are employed locally. So basically, we are doing our bit from that point of view. When I talk to people about missing out on tenders and that sort of thing, the biggest feedback I get is because they haven't had a chance to tender for anything that might be going. At least under our procurement policy, we do have it that there has got to be one local tenderer who is put in. So I actually support the recommendation that we've had put in front of us today.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you. I just would like to respond to Lynette's point. I think it's important that we buy local. The income from the Ashburton District Council is not all spent on purchases. So I think that's another point. It may not actually, as John mentioned, we don't know how much we are spending local, but anecdotally, there's a lot of opportunity to buy more locally. And I wouldn't suggest we pay more to buy local. I would suggest there's the weightings to the attributes are altered so that local has a greater priority. And I would suggest, very similar to the Timaru District Council, who acknowledge the importance of buying local in their district for their businesses and their ratepayers, that up to $10,000 we have, for example, a maximum of a 5% margin, under $1,000, for example, a 10%, up to 100,000, a 2%, and over 100,000, a 1% margin for the opportunity to do it locally or to purchase locally, all things being considered. And who is local? Well, I would have thought that would be self-evident. Local is people that are owning a business locally, or that are ratepayers and they own a business, or that are ratepayers employed in a business. I'm disputing the whole idea of central contracts. So if you want to, if the best tender was a local business and they employed ratepayers, then I think that's fine. And I think it's essential that we do more, demonstrate more than tokenism, to including to recognising our local businesses. And if we can alter the weightings, and the policy may not to be changed, that's beyond my scope. But I think what is within our scope, and we have an opportunity to give the local district boost with our purchases, and it may not be significant, or it may be. We don't have that information sadly available. But not to do something, I think, is disgraceful.
Yeah, just thinking about the Timaru one, where they put for the bigger projects 1% weighting on it. So when we build our admin and library building, 1% on 50 odd million is about $500,000.
Sorry to interrupt, Amir. No, I didn't. Timaru don't do that. Theirs is 5%, I think, up to a maximum variation of $2,000. I don't think they do it. That was my suggestion. I understand that what you're saying, but you've also, people are going to tender. It would be very, very sort of weird if they tendered to exactly the limits of the margin allowed for local business, because it's a closed tender for that type of thing. And I think that would be bizarrely peculiar, because the tenders I've seen, they differ by more than a couple of $1,000s.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the report it talks about public value versus local value, and does the business who tenders get the work and it helps their profits, or do you take one that's a bit further out, which could be a wee bit cheaper, and then the whole of the ratepayer base benefits from that? And it's a hard one to weigh up, and it's not simple. But I've got John there, and then Roger. John, we can't hear you yet.
I'd just like to ask the likes of Roger and Angus whether they've had any feedback on this concept of buying local from the council. Certainly from where I sit, I've never heard anything that people want the council to buy locally. Obviously, you are going to buy locally for the things that you have to buy locally type of thing. But my understanding, as I said before, as long as the locals get the chance to tender, then they're quite happy. So I'd just be interested in get Roger and Angus's feedback on that.
Yep. Roger? Oh, Angus, you go first.
I've had quite a few comments over the years, and one particular one at EA Networks, when we were doing that, someone actually really challenged me and said, well, why don't you tender? So he didn't, he won the tender. He actually won the tender from his Auckland warehouse position and where he used to buy most of the stuff from. So I think if it's the New Zealand world out there, and sometimes if they don't tender, they don't get to work. If they do tender, they see a fair chance of actually getting it. So I think there's a two-sided thing here. I'm actually in option 2 because it's the middle ground. It's offering a preference for local suppliers in most instances, and that's where I'll be coming from. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Roger, did you want to add anything there, or?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, thank you for that. Couldn't quite hear what Angus was saying. You were breaking up there a wee bit, but I'm like John. I think our ratepayers and our businesses, as long as they know they've had a fair crack at tendering, that's all that they're happy with. I would go with option 2 also, but I'm conscious that if we start instructing staff what percentages they may move in when they need to buy locally, I would just like to encourage them to get the best deal, buy locally if they can, and trust their common sense and expertise to get on with it. But I'm happy with option 2 in light of the present circumstances.
Yeah, and I think the main thrust is that the local people do get to put their prices in, and the policy picks that up. Tony, just thinking about if we adopt the recommendation here, do we need to do anything with the policy, or is this just flow into it, or what's the next step if we adopt this recommendation?
Thank you. No, so in essence, you wouldn't need to do anything further with the policy. The policy is high level and principles based. And what would happen is that table that we've got in the recommendation there would flow through to management, and all staff will be made aware of what's been instructed from council in terms of how to apply the principles for the next 12 months.
Great. So anyone who would like to sponsor that recommendation? Lynette moved and John seconded. Open for further debate. Being none, I'll put the motion. I am in favour. Please raise your hand. Against? Carolyn, 1. Passed. Carolyn, do you want that recorded? I assume that was a no, but we couldn't hear you.
Sorry, yes, that was a no. No, it doesn't need to be recorded. Presumably I was the only one that voted against it, was I? From
You
your...
were.
I'll remember it.
Good on you. I'm pretty certain you were the only one that voted no, just looking around the wee screen I've got. That's good. The next item of business is the number 7. And let me get to there. Elected members' remuneration is on page 32. There was a wee bit of flicking through to get there. And this is just basically that we receive the Remuneration Authority's correspondence. So you'll see there a letter attached from Fran Wild, who chairs the Remuneration Authority, and recommending that we sit tight and let them or government do something and do it on a whole countrywide basis rather than each person doing it. Liz.
Good morning. I just had a couple of questions. So I know you drafted a letter through to the Remuneration Authority. Did you receive this letter before your letter was sent, or were they? Is this in response to your letter?
Yeah, no,
I
it's
know
not.
it's a
I did send a
not-
letter to the Remuneration Authority, and they pretty well must, I was going to say passed in the post, but
yeah.
they passed in cyberspace. I sent a letter stating, after discussing with councillors via email, that we would not be seeking in Ashburton anyway a rise in our remuneration next year, and the bulk of the councillors also said, not all, but the bulk also said a decrease in our remuneration would also not be taken unfavourably. So, and that letter has gone up. But I think this letter was separate to that. It was probably being drafted while mine was being drafted, and they crossed. So no reference.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you. And then just another question, which maybe Philippa could answer, is the mileage claims. So how are they incorporated into the remuneration? Are they included in that, or are they separate?
Yes, good morning. The mileage and any other allowances are separate to the remuneration pool. So they're not factored in at all into the remuneration pool.
Thank you.
John, you did. Yeah, John, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a question. If we wanted to make submissions to the Remuneration Authority, and here I'm talking about submissions about the flexibility of whether we want to spend the total allocation or not, should those submissions come from the ADC, or do we have to put those through the Local Government Association?
I do not know the answer to that, but Philip or Hamish may give some guidance, and if they don't know the answer, we could ask that question further up. Hamish.
Certainly the Ashburton District Council can make representation to the Remuneration Authority about any matter important to you. If you chose the Local Government New Zealand route, you'd have to put up a remit, and that opportunity does exist very shortly, in fact, with the delayed AGM. And then that remit has to get support at the AGM from other councils. So the Local Government New Zealand process is more time consuming. It's exposed to voting at an AGM by all other councils, and there's no certainty as to what that outcome would be if that's the process that this council chose to pursue. It doesn't say it's wrong, but you don't know the outcome until, and in fact, the next AGM I see is going to be the end of November. So we could propose it to Local Government New Zealand via the formal remit process, and the outcome of that would not be known until November. Equally, you can simply write to the Remuneration Authority, and they'll put that into their thinking, no doubt, but it's not likely to influence to the same extent as a remit from Local Government New Zealand. But both options are available.
Okay, so any further questions on that? So there's a recommendation there that we receive that report. Oh, Liz.
I was just going to move the report.
Great.
Recommendation, sorry.
Second up. Diane. Further discussion, debate? It's really for your information, but everyone in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you. Next item is the financial variance report, and that was circulated earlier. I haven't got enough screens to open it up and too scared to flick from one screen to the other in case I lose all of you. So I've read the report. Paul's report today sort of summarises, well, it doesn't really. Paul's report was April, that was March. So that report was probably more business as usual, but you've all had it. Are there any questions, and I'll say business as usual before lockdown. So there was no real flow through at that stage, but the April report certainly will flow through with repercussions and pause for precluded that that is coming. John?
Yeah, just thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. I note that on the balance sheet, the work in progress has gone up by close on $6.6 million. Two parts to that. One, what is included in work in progress, because it is a significant amount at $18.2 million, and why the increase since the 1st of January of $6.6 million.
See, Rachel is here with us. Rachel, would you have an answer for that?
Yeah, sure. So on work in progress includes any jobs that are happening in the infrastructure area. So that's all the roading, all of the water, anything like that, plus some of the things that go through commercial property. Occasionally we get little things going through there for some of the information systems projects as well. The reason that it gets so big is the infrastructure assets are held on a separate fixed asset register. So they don't actually get added to that until the end of the year. So it gets big right through the year, gets bigger and bigger, and then at the end of the year, everything gets capitalised as of the 1st of July, and then that will come back to a more reasonable level.
Great. Any further questions of the finance report? Could I have a move and a second that we receive that report? John moved and Carolyn second. Any further debate, questions? Carolyn, you got your hand up still. You were just seconding. Yeah. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you. So that's item number 9 is next, and it's COVID-19 lockdown update. Should we go to you first, Hamish, or who would you like to go to for the leadership team, executive team? Well, I'm trying to. We can't hear you, Hamish. You're just still mute. There we.
Yes, sorry, that my fault. I apologise. The change to level 3 has been pretty meaningful for council because it has allowed our open spaces team to get back to work, and we're all very pleased about that. Not work in exactly the same way as they were able to work prior to the pandemic. And that we're very conscious of social distancing, of hygiene, and keeping our staff safe and the community safe. But nonetheless, a return to work, which has been very welcome. And I know that group were very keen to get back out and start tidying up the district. So that's been really important this week. Similarly, those facilities of ours that are still closed, so I'm thinking of the library, the museum, and EA networks, and some of our community halls, although to a lesser extent involving a lot of staff activity. Those main 3, we have got people in the back room starting to do work that isn't related to the public being able to access those facilities, but is in relation to taking advantage of the opportunity to work. So, for example, some of the I know some of the library staff are weeding out old books that haven't been read for a while and sorting through that. I know the EA Network Centre have got a program of some maintenance that is much easier to do when there's nobody in the facility. And the museum are working on some of the collections and acquisition stuff. So it's good to have activity. The main office is still closed. We can't open that until level 2, and even then we'll need to have safe systems in place. So it feels like we're moving in the right direction, but still a lot of activities not quite normal. In terms of our redeployment, we continue to have people available to various agencies, government agencies in the welfare response, which is kind of morphing into the social recovery piece of the emergency. And particularly we are still manning the 0800 number, and our people are involved with the delivery of pharmaceutical and food needs for those who can't otherwise access it. So we continue with that work. We've had some very positive feedback from the Meals on Wheels people. They really appreciate the assistance we've been able to give that organisation. And I know our relationship with the Ministry of Social Development is really good. In terms of economic recovery, the Mid Canterbury Open for Biz website has got off to a roaring start. I think yesterday we had over 160 businesses have registered on that website. We're delighted with that response. It's a fantastic response from the business community. There's ongoing developments of that website to make it a little more functional and interactive as time goes by. But when you think from kind of idea to going live was around about a week, that must be some sort of land speed record for a functional website. And Bevan and Ruben in particular, and our third-party suppliers of the website design have done just a magnificent job, and delighted it's been really well received. And in fact, we're starting to hear that one or two other councils have noticed MidCan Open for Business website and are looking to us to perhaps explain or outline how we did that, because it's something they can see would be of value in their community as well. So it's nice to be noticed by our neighbours and colleagues for doing something that has real value at these times. So other than that, Mr Mayor, I think the only other highlight would really be the return to construction activity, and True Line in the centre of town site for the river crossing, in particular ACL for some water meters and the water maintenance contract. Those things have all sort of started up again. I know the roading team are busy working with Fulton Hogan. So there has been a return to a lot of activity in a contracting sense, as well as our own staff back to work. And anecdotally, you're starting to hear people talk about level 3 feels quite different on the roads in the community. There's life again to the business activity that didn't exist a week ago. So all those are really positive signs. So that's a brief update, Mr Mayor, from myself.
Thanks, Hamish. We might go to other exec team members if there's something they want to share with us. But yeah, you said the level 3 activity out on the roads and what have you is picked up. It should not have picked up as much as what it has picked up. I think people are treating it more as a level 2 or a level 1, and should remember that we are still level 3, and which is not much different to level 4. So we've made some huge gains and made some huge sacrifices of businesses and dollar value, and even in our personal lives where we've been cooped up, so to speak, for over a month. We don't want to lose those gains, so we still need to do the isolation and all those little bits and pieces. So people out there, it's level 3, it's not level 1.
Yeah, it's very true. It's a timely reminder. I did read something during the week that there's an estimate that something like 95% of New Zealand business entities or business organisations are back at work under level 3 to some degree. So 95% of business entities are back at work. So I think even though that is still, the business activity is a lot still less than that, I think around about 75% of business activity, because I guess the hospitality sector are maybe doing takeaway coffees but not doing meals or whatever, then there's still economic activity down. But if you think of 95% of New Zealand businesses back at work, then there's a real sign that the economy is grinding back up. And that's the trick, isn't it? To continue to be safe and to do all that in a manner that continues to protect the spread of COVID while trying to get the economy back underway. That's clearly the balance now.
Yeah, we've certainly got through most of it, so we just don't want to lose those gains. But I see in the paper today, student armies out there too, doing deliveries to over 65s or 70, something like that.
Yes, I read that myself, and I was delighted to see that. They were, of course, such a powerful force for help through the earthquakes and a decade ago, and it's wonderful to see them reaching out and helping in Ashburton, and in fact. The photo of the people helping are quite dear to us, and have worked with us, have been involved with the Tuia program, Mr. Mayor, and nice to see local kids making a really positive difference at this time.
Yeah, it's good to see Alice on that photo. That's good. Councillors, any questions? The exec team seem to be, Hamish seems to have covered their topics. If not, thanks very much. And we will, takes us to the end of the open part of the meeting. So would someone like to move that we move into committee? Liz and Carolyn, all in favour, raise your hand. All done, thank you. And